Real people, real stories, and real challenges that break the status quo. I'm your host, Zivile, and welcome to Perception Paradox. Welcome back to Perception Paradox, and today we have a very inspiring and creative guest, Jame, who is joining us to share his story. And his background is not very usual, so to say, because we have two worlds emerging into one, entrepreneurship and creativity. And I guess there is no need for more introduction besides the fact that we're going to dive into the heritage, identity, creativity. What does it mean to be an artist in thriving cities like Berlin, Sao Paulo, and how does a creator feel in the venture capital role? So many more topics to explore. So if you're into the creator's economy, if you want to learn more how to combine different multiple worlds and how to get courage to try things and to fail, I guess this episode is for you. Without no more, James, welcome to Perception Paradox.
Yes, really exciting. Thank you. You said some really nice things already.
I'm flattered. Amazing. How are you today?
I'm good. Morning was a bit not smooth, but I'm into it now.
What's happening? Is it a new moon or something?
I think it's just jet lag. But is there a new moon?
I think so. Actually, I think now it's something like that. With every moon, it's always this special new moon or a special full moon, so you never know.
I do, just quickly on this astrological topic, and we don't need to spend hours on it. I think we could. Are you familiar with the concept of Saturn? Like Saturn returning, sorry.
Yeah, but you can elaborate more. I mean,
the first time I came across it was when I went to a music gig in London maybe 5 years ago, and this musician, her name's Nao, Nao, her whole album is called Saturn, and I didn't know why. I thought maybe she just likes planets, and she just goes, I dedicated this whole album to the concept of Saturn returning, and long story short, it's just that it comes 3 times in your life, and every time it arrives in your life, something changes. That is very generic, just something changes. So obviously it can be applicable to everyone. But I would say, like, I think this year was quite a big change. And so can you bring up the moon, Saturn, Rose topic?
Nice. I can't wait to dive into it. No, I mean, like, I'm a huge fan of planets and astrology and mixed combination of different things and signs. But sometimes I think we rely too much on external factors and some kind of big visions and ideas rather than really relying within ourselves. So that's why I like to keep it a bit funny twist on that, you know. But I'm a huge fan, so big respect for everyone who is diving more into these topics because I like to read and dig them from their learning. So it's cool. But the cool story about the Saturn, actually. So you are right now in London.
Yes. Here briefly. Staying with my sister. The reason why I do come to London more often is to see my sister, and this time around, or this year at least, it's getting more interesting because she will get married next month.
Woohoo!
And I'm in the process of writing the speech, and so it's exciting, good vibes. And my parents, they live in China, so they will come. They will come for the wedding. But this is
okay. I was about to ask you, are you now still on the blank page of your speech, or you got a bit more further?
I've written a
2 words
draft. I've got loads of notes, and then I asked my sister, what's the vibe? What do I need to know? And she said, James, it's going to be 5 minutes only. And I was like, only 5 minutes? All my notes, I've written so much.
And you already prepared the whole keynote. Well, you can record it and then to have a follow up with the QR code, and people can just listen in the evening, you know.
Do a longer version.
Yeah. Okay, so cool. You already touched base a bit about your heritage, right? So you originally, like, your heritage is coming from China, and then you grew up in UK in London. Then you moved to Berlin, and you moved to multiple places recently to Brazil, Sao Paulo. And I was curious to ask, just to kick off this conversation, how was it growing up with such a huge, diverse cultural influences from different sides?
So on the paper, what happened was, so my parents are mainland Chinese. My dad's from Sichuan province and my mum's from Anhui province. They moved over to the UK. I have an older sister, I just mentioned. She was born in Liverpool and then I was born in Bath. So that's just like on the what happened is I was born, and shortly after I was born, I then spent the first couple of years of my life back in China.
Uh-huh.
It's quite interesting now I like look back on it. Um, Basically, from my parents' point of view, is free childcare. So I was looked after by my grandparents, and actually my sister did that process before, and then we just switched. And so my sister was like old enough not to be difficult, so my parents then continued, took her to like kindergarten and stuff like that. And then I went to China, and when I came back, I like Chinese was my first language, that's for sure, because I have some interesting stories, or at least one story that my mum tells me that I had some struggles at kindergarten communicating with the the teachers there. And there's I can go down that rabbit hole, but just like some funny moments. So I'm spending too much time on that first 2 years, but I guess it's quite important.
Mm-hmm.
Because fast forward, I'll briefly fast forward it. It's like childhood, teenage years, uni, all in the UK. And I think with many third culture kids, I'm sure it's just like a not foreign concept. It's this identity balance, or some people could call it a struggle, identity finding.
Mm-hmm.
For me, it was very much like, am I Chinese? Am I British? In England, I don't seem too British, but in China, I don't seem too Chinese. And really fast forward to right now, I'm just so grateful and lucky to be both. I hope that answers your question. I didn't go, it's quite high level, but long story short, cultural identity growing up, I'm just very grateful for all the experiences that I had, and I will kind of handpick the best of both.
What were the conflicts you experienced? You moved back when you were 2 years old, so it's like super young. You are thrown into the British environment immediately from spending so much actively in Chinese, two different cultures. How did you have any struggles actually in integrating yourself besides the language and then trying to understand what's happening now? How
So,
did how
so
was it?
I think the funny story that I mentioned, I will just actually say the story because
Please do.
think from going from two, like coming, like moving countries when you're young, even younger, is easier than when you get older, I think, because you hold on to less, or at least when you're a 2-year-old toddler, you don't know anything at all, so you're just going from ground zero up anyway. But the funny story is, I know Chinese was my first language because my mum tells me the story of when I first joined kindergarten. And for context, quickly, in China, at least back in the day, and in less urban places, less big cities, it's normal for little boys not to wear like nappies or diapers. Instead, they'll just have a hole in their trousers. So
Really?
if they wanted to go for a wee or a number two, then they would just do it on the street, in the park, wherever, and then
Okay.
or over a trash can, whatever. I've seen that happen before. And so when I went to kindergarten in England, I told the teacher I wanted to go to the toilet in Chinese. I did not understand her. She did not understand me, and I just did a poo on the floor. And so
Oh my God.
the reason why I remember the story is because my mum remembers paying for the dry cleaning of the carpet, and this is a this is just a fun version of your question, right? You said like any interesting moments integrating or going in. That was probably the very first point. It got a lot easier then. So after that, I just went to school. So I you know even today my English is much better than my Chinese. I still speak Chinese, Mandarin. I didn't find it too different or challenging.
Yeah.
I just went to school, had my friends. The interesting side was when I then moved to London, and that's like going from a small town in England to London. I mean, I'm sure you have the same opinion of London. It's just multicultural magic.
Oh yes, absolutely. So how did art come into your life? Were you exposed to art since childhood
Uh,
or adulthood, or
in
what's
yeah,
happened?
I'm thinking because I'm spending so much time uh, doubling down on my art this year. And occasionally, I do think where it came from. and the origins, like the origin story of what I'm doing. I think simply put, I just really enjoyed it at school. I'm not sure I can go deeper than that. Like these art class moments, which are nothing like fancy or special. It's just you just do art in a school environment. I really enjoyed them, and then all the way till middle school, high school times, I was doing art by myself in the classroom in my free time. So not only
Okay.
just in class, and that's where I just felt good, like listening to my music, doing what I'm doing. I did have an amazing, I would call her a teacher, but she's much more than that, like inspiration at the time. And it made me, I don't know, I really enjoyed it. Like of all the subjects that we did at school and all the time that I spent at school, that was really up there alongside, hanging out with friends and stuff like that.
And how was your traveling towards the Chinese art? Because you're an artist who is more into this kind of going towards the heritage art, from
I,
what I've noticed from your digital presence.
I,
How did you get there?
I do, it's more, that's more, I think, there's the art itself, so
Uh-huh.
painting and what I make, and then there's the more the how I market myself. So when it comes to the what I make, it's not actually intentionally Chinese. I've had people, especially Chinese people, say, "Oh, this is similar to the Mobi Hua, the ink works of
Okay.
traditional Chinese," and I do acknowledge that, but it's not intentional. I did not. I like also the Chinese art, but I didn't make it a thing to do it. It's more so in how I market myself, where it's exactly, in art I did. I mean, with art, it helped me find my identity, and my strapline is I'm a British-born Chinese figurative artist. Like that is just what I am in the art world, and therefore I put that Chinese side on the same playing field as the British-born side, and use it as more of the this is how I brand and myself. I hope that answers the question.
It does actually. All right. So, great branding, by the way, but that we're gonna get
Thank you.
later on. But talking about you being so passionate about art, and only like in the last few years, your online presence really skyrocketed, where you put a lot of efforts, I guess, during the COVID time. But it's not something what you studied, right? After school, you went a pretty traditional way. Can you share more about influence of your decision making, what to study, what to choose as a career? Because you kind of had different hats along the way. We met with you when you were part of the venture capital firm. Then you went to an accelerator at the same time as I did, to become a founder and build a company. And it was a whole roller coaster.
It,
How it all connects.
I'm also really interested to then flip the script back to you because we met. I think we have like such interesting paths, and we we overlapped briefly in this what was it in Riga, Latvia,
In the
which you
dance
were
floor.
on the dance floor. But you were there. You were back at Tech Chill. It happened just recently.
Yes, I was actually. It was amazing. A few weeks back. Really, really awesome. Still same vibe, good time, amazing speakers with treat, great team. Really, I think it's one of my favorite conferences for sure. How small it is and how intimate and how easy it
Really,
is to connect to people, so you really can get more in depth rather than just
I
yeah.
should have been there and seen you speak again. It's a bit of what I was saying. It's really nice that despite our different backgrounds, we overlapped then, and then the overlap was that event, doing the Antler program, the accelerator, founder hat on, and then going into creator mode
It's
afterwards.
quite crazy. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, different. Uh, yeah, we're doing different content, but like the creatorship is still the same. So we share a lot of things. But going back to your question, it was about the paths that I took. Oh, could you repeat? Sorry. I went on a tangent and I lost.
It was more like your whole journey, right? How did the external environments influence who you are today in a way of your career trajectory? Because you did went quite traditional way after school, didn't you? You didn't go
Yes.
straight into art, what makes you alive. You ended up working, doing something with numbers and ending up in this kind
Yeah.
of startup scene. So maybe you can narrate a bit your quick decision making? How did right now you are here as an artist and also still trying to build something, but what's happened in between?
I think there's some interesting concepts I would use to help me answer. One,
Go ahead.
not concepts, just words. One would be inflection points, and then another one would be, yeah, as you said, balancing. I would say external things and internal what I know is true and what I like. So the inflection points were definitely like at the end of school or just during the end of school time, where in England, you do your A levels and you know what you're applying to for university. And for me, it was like I wasn't sure actually what I wanted to study. I did a mix of economics, physics, art, maths. My dad wanted me to be an architect because he saw what I liked. He was
Okay.
like, well, James, there's this thing that you could do, and it's a
Smart.
traditional-ish. Oh no, it's traditional. It's long. It's really traditional. It was a solid job, is what my dad was kind of anticipating. I was like, no, not interested. So I applied for 5 different universities in the UK system at 5 different courses. But the point was, all of those universities, bar one, was in London. I just wanted to be in London. I think that was my fascination at the time. My hypothesis back then, and by the way, I did not speak like this then. I did not say I have a hypothesis of the next year. I just said I want to go to London. But looking back, I wanted London to go to London for uni because I thought that would be like the launch pad to the rest of the world. Big city, you can only go,
That's yeah.
you can really only go bigger. So I then studied, well, even before I went to university, I had a little flicker of, do I want to go to art school? I had a really nice moment where I sold a piece of work that gave me a lot of confidence, but by that point it was already too late. I was already signed up, and in September I was going to study a mix of politics, economics, and French in London, right? So that was like, I will now stop talking about my studies because it's actually very relevant to my life.
It is. I think it's really relevant actually,
Really?
because
Oh,
in
okay.
general, I see the university and when you're studying different subjects,
What
that
did you study?
it forms you as a human being, the whole environment and all the subjects. I never knew what I wanted to study actually. I
Amazing.
studied international business and communication. I had a seat in UK to study marketing, but then since I wanted to do so many different nonprofit organizational work and volunteering, that I thought it does not make sense for me to go to UK if I can study in English in my home country, and instead of going to figure out how to make a living there, I can actually invest into the skill set development. So yeah, I had this international business communication bachelor's, which was fun. It was really fun. It planted a lot of seeds for me. So, but I wanted to study politics actually, politics and economics, but it was the second choice. So.
We have every time we speak, I'm figuring out more. You could say similarities, but I didn't know this before. And my question back to you is, what was the external factor for you to decide to, well, have those two options in the first place? Was it you knew it, or there was a little bit of, I don't know, parental
No,
friend?
it just was. I think I just never had the pressure from my family to study what they wanted me to study. At the end of the day, they wanted me to be a doctor, so a
Oh,
dentist.
is
So,
it?
yeah, they
It's
told
not
me that
aging point.
afterwards. Can you imagine that? I could have been a great one, but they saw my personality and they knew it's not gonna happen because I would just die within myself. Like I would be so
You
bored.
need to go to the hospital to get checked out. Yeah, I see.
I would love it, but because I like helping people, but I think there are different tools. But why I chose those two, I just try to identify what kind of, I don't know what I want, but what I like doing. And the reason I was considering economics and politics because I really love the history and I love different international relations. So I thought it's a very good option. And I was good with history and stuff. So, but then business is business and communication was my jam at the end of the day.
Isn't it interesting that even the things that you liked or found interesting back then, and you could say were good at, you fit into your life. At least this is how I see you in your international, people-related type work,
Yeah.
speaking about, startups are part of the economy and it's economics in some way. Like you've got that today.
Yeah.
I don't know if
Yeah,
you.
it's quite interesting. So, okay, so let's go back to, so you studied, you've done university. Did you find it interesting or did you have to push through?
I struggled because I couldn't really land on something that I found too interesting, if that makes sense, or motivating enough. Motivating. Some things were interesting. I just wasn't motivated enough in the studies part. So my degree was quite loose, where you could change modules year after year. So if I didn't like heavy economics, I would do more politics. At the end of my 3 years at university, I actually, I would consider almost failed. So there's like basically first 2-1, 2-2, A, B, and C.
Yeah.
A, all the job opportunities are yours. B is the average minimum, and then C is like you're going to struggle. So that's what I got, because during this time I didn't really motivate or apply myself in the studies. Instead, I was trying to hustle businesses at the time.
Okay, so that was I was about to ask, where did you put your energy? Because you have a lot of energy, so clearly you were not just hanging around and drinking only.
No,
So
no,
businesses.
my sister used to joke that I didn't drink enough. I was going to sleep too early at university and stuff like this. I mean, obviously, I did fun things, but I did channel my energy towards. I mean, today I would call it entrepreneurship, venture building, whatever. But back then it was just like hustle to try some make some money and just do things I was interested in. There was two specific things I like to do, or what I did. One was, again, looking back, I call it an online marketplace for fine arts, from emerging artists. That's solving my own problem type thing. I wanted to sell my art, know when to do it. Let's build it. That did not last too long. And then the second one is I wanted to I wanted to fundraise basically for the victims of Grenfell Tower. So there's a huge fire in London in 2017, as a result of bad government. Like I don't want to go too much into it, but I wanted to raise money. So I sold t-shirts, and then I also hosted events like debates and attended all these university fashion shows to raise money.
Nice.
And that's where I spent most of my
Here we
time.
go. Your political degree paid off.
Yeah, and
Hosting the debates.
yeah. I mean, like facilitation, right? Like that's a big part of it. Getting the right people in one room, which is, also what you do, is really part of it.
Yeah.
And facilitating the discussion, because if the discussion doesn't happen, that's not good. We need to talk. But that is university in a nutshell. Didn't study too much, did other things, didn't get a good grade at the end, and then I had to go figure another inflection point, what I was going to do afterwards.
And how did you end up in the venture capital? Like, you were
Yes.
trying to build ventures and you were drawn to entrepreneurship. So after graduating, was the DC was the first place you landed, or?
No. So again, then I can just continue from the story that I just kind of left you on a cliffhanger. So I didn't get a good grade at university, so the only option was to get not such a good job or continue education. So I did a master's for 1 year in business. It was a business master's, to extend my runway, like my thinking runway, for a year. In this time, I self-taught myself graphic design, because business itself was quite dry, like fine. And then, having self-taught myself graphic design, I found an opportunity to work for a startup in London, as a kind of designer, but also generic startup employee, where you do many things. And that was my first step into my first proper long-term job, and that was moving to Berlin after my master's to work in a design studio. It's like a full suite agency that does digital products and services. So that was step one. And if the question is then, you mentioned the venture capital side. Already then, through the design, through what I did at university, I did really enjoy building. And in big city life, and at that time, the thing to build was startups. And building for me or entrepreneurship for me is whatever, even if you're building a house, a startup, or building whatever, it all has the same things, like determination, people skills, persuading people, working with people. They all share the same thing. That's why I really like entrepreneurship, because it makes you just feel human. You're just doing all these things that stretch you. But after the design studio experience, COVID happened, so I had to leave at that time. I spent 6 months, as I would like to call it, being a full-time artist in Berlin. My dad would say full-time unemployed, which is also correct. It's also correct. But long story short, I was doing art and applying for new jobs, and that new job that was next was in VC. So,
Okay.
so hopefully that makes sense. Where my interest in entrepreneurship, my interest in building, led me to that side when looking for
Yeah.
next opportunity.
Amazing. Okay, so where did you get the courage to fail? Because it seems like through all your experiences, you're trying different things, and there are a lot of potential to fail and to be rejected. What brings you motivation and, yeah, the
Yeah.
resilience to do that?
Um, I think there's many answers to this one.
Okay.
I'm deciding which ones to share first because I'm very happy to share them all. I think I think the topic of resilience to failure. I think when you're young, or at least maybe I'm speaking from a privileged state where I just did things anyway and I didn't really consider anything a failure in myself. Like there's certain things I would do. I would paint this. I would try and sell it. If it didn't sell, I tell myself at least I sold it, or at least I
Where do you think it's coming from? Because like in the society nowadays, like if we,
yeah
let's say you try to do something, you're already okay, red flag, you failed, it's
yeah.
not good. Well, at least now it has changed a lot, but in many ways it still exists.
I think I'm going to answer this in a weird way, but I will arrive at the conclusion
Okay.
because I'm really sure that a lot of my drive, all of the positive aspects that I believe I have, and some of the like not so positive, I would say, I can derive from the relationship that I have with my parents, specifically my dad. So if we're talking about failure and societal pressures around it, I mean, the first society is your tribe, your family. And I think that if my to gain my dad's validation, I had to do certain things. But I also have an older sister, so I also rooted a lot of my thoughts in number one, can I compare to her and beat her? And then at some point I couldn't. And therefore my mindset was, what can I do randomly and differently, aka venture art, things that my dad would never even considered. And if I could excel and try something there, that would gain some validation.
Okay.
I would also say, yeah, that I would leave that there. It got it, yeah. There's that topic to it, but that is like again, I'm well reflected on this topic, and I don't think this topic ever finishes. You know,
No,
this
no.
relationship that we have with our parents, but that would be a concept I would talk about in this question. But sorry, you mentioned something about the societal.
Pressure and resilience, and but
Yeah,
yeah, I think it's kind of answered. You answered it very well. So in a way that trying to, I don't know, for me that's the way it sounded. Correct me if I'm
yeah,
wrong. That to gain some kind of recognition, validation from your inner circle is you just try to find the ways to be noticed in a way
yeah,
through the things you're doing. And especially when you're not the firstborn child, you're the secondborn, so you have, I'm a firstborn, so you always, someone sets the standards high or someone like sets the route, and then you kind of,
yeah.
besides you being cool setting you kind of try to also catch up to someone who is in your family and to kind of
How
look
many,
after.
how many younger siblings? I remember you
I
have a
have
younger
one
brother.
younger brother.
So you have the I know how your brother feels, so to speak, to have an older sister. So my question would be this: did you ever, what I just described, did you notice that in maybe your brother? Like in your brother trying to overachieve you or compete or
I
whatever?
don't think so. I think we are very different.
Mm,
The way we share the same values, but the way we do things, we ended up right now in very similar direction, but we got there very different ways. I think it's in general in every relationship when you have some kind of age difference and upbringing, it is in some way, I think, the case. But I'm not an expert on that. I just thought something what I observe. That's it. Okay, very interesting. So you have the resilience to,
Zivi, I have a question at this point for
yeah.
you. If we talk about that the big topic of failure, and I do like that today more than ever. It's like we can talk about it like this and almost smile about it, joke about it, and be open about it. That's the number one thing. So I'm curious, what is your definition of failure? Like you can just obviously there's so many. I want to hear your one and what failure meant to you in your journey until now and
It's a very, yeah, it's a very long journey. So if briefly the definition, so I don't, for me, failure as a word does not really, it never existed in a way. So it's more like something what you learned, something what did not work. From where it's that coming, I don't know, maybe from the books. I love books from early age. But if you look more in depth, so the failure was there because the society was expecting you, at least in the Baltics, to do things and to excel and to be perfect, right? So you could not really make a mistake, which is actually a failure. So for me personally, it was really difficult to go out the perfectionist mindset. And the way I've done that, I put myself in very uncomfortable situations. So before it would be like, oh, if I don't, I don't know, like if I don't get the highest place in some competition or something, I will fail, which is not necessarily, maybe it's not your goal right now to become the first one or to go to the top ranking European competition. So yeah, I think I learned along the way. I've never seen it as a failure, but within I still felt some things as a failure without admitting, because I have this like, it was like a paradox, your mind and what you think and what you feel and it took some time to get into this equal equation where I just like, a lot of things that shifted the way I see and perceive the environment and life. So one of them is the learnings and just going for it and trying. And I think it's also like a muscle. So the more you do, the more you try different ways, the more resilient you become, similar like sports. So that would be my, I guess, understanding of that.
I think what's really nice is we share again the topic of nothing is a failure if you learn something. I know that's the cheesiest thing to say.
It is cheesy, right?
It's so cheesy, but I'm a cheesy guy. I like it. And this cultural aspect towards failure, like different cultures will consider something a failure, like, yeah, and not just in professional terms, but in like, oh, you're this age and you haven't got married, and you're even in these terms, then you're considered a failure in another way. This is in China, by the way. This is still very big.
Oh, really?
But they even have this name for women who are 30 who don't get married. There's like,
too bad.
Yeah, but in China,
What?
well, you're not Chinese, so it's all good. It's all good. It's interesting because my sister is getting married and she's 29. She's doing her. She never gave any shit about like pressures. I always see my sister as a headstrong person, but coincidentally enough, she does then fit into this Chinese like
Framework.
Yeah, or my parents and Chinese one. But quickly,
it seems like it's changing. So
yeah, but on the again, sorry, the failure topic in culture and society. I'm getting to the point. Within startups, this is where I think the community, at least because I know it and you know it better than other little communities, in other places. How do you see it? Because failure is actually statistically likely. 99% X, Y, Z will fail. So you just assume when you're doing something, you've got such a high chance of failure, but you do it anyway. I think that's interesting.
yeah, but I think it depends how you set your mind. You're aware of potential failure, and when it comes to, let's say, startup scene, right, the failure is, let's say, it's a different definition and different understanding. And yes, there are failures. It's a lot of money involved and a lot of cash, people, and etc. So the way I see it, that it's just more like if you want to build a successful company, you cannot wake up every day and think, oh, I might fail, because your mind is a very powerful tool. So you really have to do everything. You have to be aware of the potential risks and to set your mind for that, but also you should not be setting your mind every day for failure. But going back to you, my dear,
Yes.
so you went to Antler, you identified that you failed to build a startup within creators economy. Why do you think you failed, or
Mm.
what's happened that you lasted only half a year?
So there was just for context for the Antler bit, I did that 2.5 years in VC. And by the way, when we talk about success and failure, I used to like asking founders, and I guess I would ask myself this even today, is what does success mean for you? Because from if I was
Yeah.
wearing the VC hat, I would want that person to say, "Oh my God, unicorn story! Yeah, we're gonna make hundreds of millions together." Like that's what the VC wants to hear and has to hear. However, people will just say, I want to, in reality, just build it to X million, sell it, get X percentage of it, live a good life. That's like success. That like everything in between, and it is good. I When I said that I then did the antler thing and failed, so to speak, I would call it failure because I didn't achieve what I wanted to achieve. I also then considered what does success mean for me, and I'm sure you also had the experience of the people you worked with, your co-founder, having the same conversation, like how long are you in this for, and when do we call it quits? And for us, we decided to call it quits if by the certain time we hadn't achieved X, and that X was quite loose at that time. It was some funding that can keep us going and enough conviction on the thesis. Again, very generic. How much money do we need to raise and how much conviction do we need on the thesis? But it just got to, as you said, half a year afterwards that we didn't have either. And then looking at opportunity cost of what else we could both do separately, that was a closed chapter and closed chapter, because we didn't even get, when people talk about 0 to 1, 1 to 10, 10 to 100, we didn't even get to 1, apart from really validating, learning about ourselves.
That's good.
A lot of learning, but no 1 in terms of first revenue in. We made some, I would say, unofficial off the cuff revenues, but it's nothing I would tell anybody.
How did you feel when you closed this chapter?
I felt, maybe because it was the time of the year, the end of the year, I felt like it made sense. I felt a bit sad because, sad, strong word, sad, but I felt, I actually felt I didn't put everything in. I don't feel like I think we would agree that the most successful, especially in the startup world, those that make it, they put 110% in, whatever that means. I don't think I did that, honestly speaking, and I don't think I gave that to my co-founder in a sense, but also at the same time, I don't feel like I got that from that person. So it could be the topic that we were tackling, it could be the combination of people that it didn't work out. I think that was my main self-reflection, that I could have given more. And so by the end, that's the kind of thought that I had. I don't know whether it was a sad feeling. It was a chapter. I'm glad I did it. We both did it, and I know you have a question on the tip of your tongue, but I would say, how did you feel after you closed that chapter? Because we were speaking a lot through last year, and our stories kind of, we have a lot to talk about. So what was your closing remark when you decided to not go that direction?
Well, it's not that I'm not going in that direction, right? It's just like what kind of tools and means of transportation you choose to get there. So
Yes.
I did not really close it. It just, for me, it was not the venture-backed way to continue what I wanted to do. And I think nowadays in the startups, we get a lot into the pressure to raise and to build something. And usually it ends up, some people end up building the wrong thing for the wrong reasons with the wrong people, instead of really understanding that there are different ways to build businesses, and not necessarily you need to go VC way. If you don't have the big problem enough to solve, so why would you raise?
I remember
Very wrong incentives of people going into the startup scene sometimes just to make money, where the main idea is, yes, money is part of it, but the main motivation should be, okay, so the problem you want to solve and to tackle. So
I love exactly this, because it's reminding me of when the means of transportation, let's say you had this red car that you had an option to go in. And I remember just before you were getting in that initial part of the car, I, not half-heartedly, I meant it. It was like, do you need another person to ride alongside you, aka co-founder? Because we both shared a similar at least energy. And now 1 year later, we can say even the same thesis or thoughts around then the creator economy. If I were to go back to your question where you said like, how did that failure point feel? What just expand a bit more? I had two learnings apart from the really personal internal ones, more professional learnings. If I could not build or was not successful in building a creator economy software out of Berlin for Europe in the time I was given or I gave myself, the two learnings is number one, I will go to a market which is relevant. So I do think there's only four mega markets for the creator economy: US, China, Brazil, and India, in terms of just singular countries. So I moved to Brazil. And the second one is if I cannot build a software for the creator economy, I will double down and become a creator myself. And so since the beginning of the year, that's when I doubled down on content creation, spent more time, strategized. I've got my Notion board, like every week I've got XYZ to complete and content. So from January until, was it May the 7th, or May now, I've grown and I've become a creator, and I would have only had this or done this through the experience of last year, learning about it, getting deeper into it,
Yeah, for
realizing
sure.
the creator economy is something that I love, because for me, the creator economy represents something. It is the closest thing I think humans have made in terms of system that has allowed creativity to thrive. Like, this is my biggest, my why for why I'm in it in some function.
But what do you believe distinguishes this era of creativity from the previous ones? Why
The
is it so important for you right now, and why you're so obsessed?
I think there's two things. One is the business models behind it. I'm so interested in this because
Okay.
100 years ago, I wrote something recently, and the thought was, let's just for a second talk about the creators that I like, and I would talk about my friend from Berlin who's a stand-up comedian, but he's huge on TikTok. A poet that I follow who's just really good at poems, and I like football as well. So I follow a few football creators talking about transfer gossip and stuff like this. Back in the day, this comedian, as in back in the day, 100 years ago, or even 20 years ago, this comedian could only speak to a room of 20 people. The poet would only have a notebook to write his thoughts, and the football commentator would just be some crazy guy at the pub, just talking about football with his friends. Today, we have the business models that the stand-up comedy person, the poet, the football commentator, they can all, if they grow correctly, diversify their revenue streams with all the options available, from digital courses to subscription model to affiliate marketing to brand deals in terms of sponsored posts. They have access to this, and it means that they can just continue their practice, their creativity, their craft for longer because they have the means to do so. So that is probably the thing I'm fascinated by the most. Then I can also talk about the format as well. So basically everything's video first these days. 20 years ago, that was crazy. But today it's so easy. I find it quite enjoyable. Videos, it's just
Yeah,
fun.
I can. That's funny. Okay, so but since this whole creators economy, right? It's very interesting how it transited, how it all grew. But what you're saying about the poet and so on, it's a very great story. I know that you love stories. It sounds very nice on paper, but when it comes to the whole market, it just became overcrowded and super noisy, and everyone is now a creator, everyone is a podcaster, hello, everyone is an
I
artist, everyone just keeps
Yeah.
trying to be an influencer, etc. How do you see this whole
Well,
market like going later
this is,
on, and
mm,
with this whole noise and
I think this is amazing because I think the question you asked is amazing given what we have talked about. And if, we talked about the ups and downs, failures, and community of the startup world, I would almost copy and paste it and put it into the creator economy world where 99% will be destined to failure, whatever that means. And only 1% can make it. Of that 1%, some will really make it and become like, uh, these superstars, platform native superstars. We'll just talk Mr. Beast, Sidemen, these people. However, this is then when it gets really startup-y because, I read a million kind of pitch decks, and the most classic theme is on the first slide, we are democratizing this and
It's everywhere, man. Like everyone
so
is democratizing.
yeah, yeah, I would question, is democracy even that good? Um, and so this is what will happen to the creator economy, where at the moment I'm making this up to some estimate, but the top 1% earn the was it the power law? Yeah, the top 1% earn 80% of the creator economy
Classic.
value, but it's changing, and I'm excited for that change.
How is it changing? So how right now the monetization streams are changing? Because also I would like us to tackle, I saw your latest newsletter about the TikTok, right? And I've known already after traveling to India, the TikTok is not available there. They're still on search of a new tools, new platforms. So anyone who wants to build something, India is the place to go, but to go basically. And there is a huge opportunity. But where do you see this whole monetization?
Yeah.
But the ways how creators can monetize and what's happening with the platform change.
So I think the main topic here is to focus on uh, who contributes to the who contributes the most to the creator economy in terms of dollar value. Let's say it's, the latest report is 250 billion. Um, the creator economy is valued at $250 billion, right? The majority of that money comes from the marketing budgets of large brands that go into what you would call influencer marketing as like a bit broad category. And if you then focus at the biggest money driver of the economy and see what's happening there, I like it because back in the day, it used to be, you've got a million followers, I'm paying you loads to make this post. And the conversion was actually, I mean, it's better than maybe Facebook or Google ads. That has diminished and become expensive per click and per conversion, that it now, all the marketing and branding teams pay the little influencer. They call them nano and micro influencers. So from 5 to 20,000 instead of a million, and they'll pay 10 or 20 of these rather than the top 1 million. And that encourages, even if you're starting out, that you can already monetize from the early days. It might not be as big as you would get as a million, but that's anyways not where the industry's heading in terms of influencer marketing. So I would still focus on like where the most money in the industry goes, and it's going more towards the long tail. And then on top of that, we know that in terms of engagement, it is also nicer to have a smaller crowd than a bigger crowd, because that's where real influence can happen. Like the intimate communities, you can never have a proper community around a billion people around Kim Kardashian. Yes, she's just a figure. However, if you're, again, thinking like a startup, going really niche, I am a painter, I paint dancers, and I paint with ink, and I tell stories. That's like already niche already compared to a Kim Kardashian, for example. And therefore, the more niche I am, the more engaged my community is, and the more likely they are maybe to sign up to my course or buy my merch or buy my art. Actually, that's actually why I do the art. So yeah.
So did I get it right from what you mentioned that what would be the key elements for to become a successful creator? No matter the channel,
Okay.
channels are different, right? So I know that you're a fan of storytelling, so I guess we can dive into that as well. What is a good story for you? And because a lot of people want to get out there to help from getting their startup out there to just actually finding the ways and means to express themselves in a more open, free way. So how can people,
Like
where should we focus?
for content creators, because by the way, I'm figuring it out. This is the
Uh-huh.
real truth, and I'm writing my learnings, my journal, what went well, what hasn't gone well.
Okay.
Um, and then I've kind of arrived at 3 points to your question in my head right now, and it's um, number one, consistency. I mean, that makes sense, right? Like these are really cliche things. What I'm about to say is not very unique, but consistency. So whatever rhythm you choose, like once a day, once a week, 4 times a week, just consistency, because the algorithm appreciates it. This is what I've learned, as in what I've seen other people talk about as well, and I'm just trying to experiment through that.
About which
Consistency.
channels are we talking? Like TikTok, Instagram,
So
YouTube?
So what I know best is TikTok and Instagram, or Instagram first, then TikTok. YouTube is obviously longer
It's
form,
a long game
um,
as well.
and maybe I can at another catch up understand your learnings from it because you're branching in different platforms, short forms for TikTok, longer form for YouTube. But the point is, like, whether you're on either, the consistency step, the authenticity step, and it's not just like showing yourself authentically, it's making sure the process is enjoyable for you. I did a couple of things which weren't so enjoyable, but so be it. I was experimenting. I'm not going to do 100 of those types of videos because I just don't enjoy it. So that speaks for itself. And the last thing is, I would call under the umbrella of play the game. I think it applies more to Instagram and TikTok than YouTube, where playing the game means the algorithm where there will be a trending audio. You need to jump on that. It's going to be six to 8 seconds for that type of reel versus a long form 1 minute. Experiment and do both, because I see parallels in other industries such as traditional music industry, where I know a rapper from London, for example. He was one of my favorite as a kid. He was super mainstream. His name's Chipmunk. He was super mainstream in his rap, very pop-like. And then suddenly he went off the radar. And I did some research, and he's still rapping, but he's being more authentic to him, and he does the really different stuff. He just made his name first, made his millions, let's say. And then once he got to that stage, he's just doing what he really loves. And I would say that for a creator, there's many ways to do it as well, but you can play the game, play the algorithms, and then when you've got 100K or whatever your goal was, you've got the platform to actually do what you love at scale still. So that's...
I love it. I think I see many creators going from being public into more private mode and speak easy vibes because they can already, and it's super cool. Yeah. How long did it take you to grow your Instagram? Because you were not that active before, and then at some point you just started really putting out the reels there, and right now you have quite a lot of views and engagement, and the huge kind of growing fan base. People are making your art as a tattoo on their body and stuff.
Yes.
Yeah, that was pretty cool. Yeah. So how long did it take you to actually gain that momentum of already crowded market of creators on Instagram?
I've had my art Instagram account. I've had Instagram as a me for like over 10 years, let's say. And I had my art account always as a separate thing. So there's me, me and my friends, and then the art account. So the art account, again, 10 years of just sporadic posting just to keep it as like a photo album of what I've done. And then January this year, or no, maybe the second half of last year when I was doing the startup related, I wanted to double down, learn more, but I really became more strict or more official in my content creation in terms of consistency, number of things I do, number of posts I do. January this year, so I set myself the goal of 5 content pieces per week. All have to be reels, but the best thing is I actually enjoy making them. Instead of like, I've never had games on my phone anyway, but I would much prefer making a video. Well, it's not prefer, I do it anyway. Creating a video for half an hour, then scrolling TikTok for half an hour, Instagram for half an hour. It's like a creative process. I've discovered new music through it. Like, I'm finding new songs to put in, and I'm like, oh, I'll add that to my Spotify anyway. So it's to answer your question, January till now, it's taken 4-5 months to grow, specifically on Instagram, by the way, because I fail on TikTok. It's almost the same content, but on TikTok I've got 300 followers, if that's the metric we're going, and then on Instagram I have 30,000, and it's almost the same content, more or less.
Okay. Well, maybe you need to diversify the content.
I need to and go,
because the content is quite different, and the reactions and also the audience is very... TikTok is still like this very, very fast consumption, and I think it's a bit changing, but it's also filters entered the world. And
is that why you want to, or you plan to go more into YouTube? You mentioned before.
Not really. Let's see. I did not really put the energy yet, but yes, YouTube is launched now, kind of. So I'll be uploading also the videos. Slowly getting there, because at the end of the day, I want to go to the people and interview them at their place, their environment, so we can go more in depth. And Instagram, TikTok, it's like when you're a solo player, it's kind of difficult to navigate through all of them. But I want to test it out now for a few months to see what kind of value it can create. Because it's interesting. Sometimes if I post something, even with a very small account, you can still see the traction. I'm like, what if I would put some more effort, like to communicate more clearly and etc. Because the main idea, of course, is to gain traction, generate leads, and to put it out more so more people can hear. But yeah, since I'm doing it kind of alone right now, and before I outsource something, or if I decide to outsource something, so I really want to know, to have know-how, so you can understand what kind of voice behind I want to create and so on. So it takes time. So I just, instead of pushing myself, I just prioritize things and adding things along the way. So now actually will be the social media chapter that I'm adding on. So
I'm looking forward to it.
yeah, let's see what I'm gonna come up with. Now I feel like I want to do it.
I'm excited. Yeah.
Cool. But all right, so what would be your advice to someone who wants to become a creator but does have this imposter syndrome that the market is too crowded?
Do you remember this? We talked about it before. We talked about that one episode of Colin and Samir, the Jacob Collier,
Oh yeah.
and you told me how much you enjoyed it, and
Oh,
I
I
enjoyed
really
it.
enjoyed it. It's a really good episode. And
And
I love their podcast and what they're doing with the whole economy. It's really cool. Some
I
fresh air for me.
yes, but basically, in answer to your question, I'll say something from someone else, and then I'll quote someone else, and then I'll try and say something from me. Jacob Collier said something really nice about when he first joined YouTube, his wave of people, because he did become famous through it 10, 15 years ago. His intention when he first joined and uploaded his first video is, what can I share to the world? What can I contribute to the platform? And then fast forward to today, it's the opposite mentality. It's people uploading with, what can I get? How can I make money? Can I become an influencer?
Yes.
And so I even think with Jacob Collier in the back of my mind is like, when I'm making this, what am I trying to share? What am I trying to say? Who am I trying to help in some way, or the more giving side?
The giving and the contribution,
Yeah.
and it's not only in the creators economy. I really like this approach of his and philosophy.
Yes.
It's
Yes.
everywhere. Like, oh, I want to be rich, I want to be famous, I want to do that, instead of actually generally like, okay, what am I out here to share? That's why I did not really push the socials, because what to push, oh, the
Yeah.
new podcast in town doesn't make sense. I needed also myself to reflect on understanding of this kind of a bit messaging and what kind of value is here, but out there I want to bring to people, and that's it. Yeah.
I would challenge you a bit and say, yes, I understand what you want to share, because you're being thoughtful, and yeah, you're thinking twice, and this is nice. But at the
Not
same
really.
time,
I
oh,
don't think that you read it right. I think it just I have my own way of doing things.
okay. I thought, okay.
It's just more like I think prioritizing time, because if you really want to do the social media, you need to be consistent. Can you be consistent? If not, what's the point? That's my next step now, to add more time actually doing the testing and seeing what works, because that's quite interesting. Everything is changing so fast.
Let's you know, talk more about this in the upcoming weeks and months, because yeah, it is changing fast. We share the same overlap, and I'm curious also to learn about your learnings on
Amazing.
even in really granular detail, length of video, like what font to use on the subtitles,
Oh yeah.
these things, like there's a lot.
So where do you get your information, source of information to learn and practice?
The best thing about, I guess, the creator economy is the creator economy is for everyone, and therefore you can learn from everyone. Even this podcast, this conversation, it does filter back in some way, but more specifically speaking, if I am looking at growing on Instagram, then I see all I need to know within platform. The algorithm is tailored that I'll see enough art people, enough dance people, enough Instagram growth people, enough trending fashion people, like in the doses that they'll give me. I have occasionally like looked into, let us say, on the internet, broader things, but if I have the top best practices from Colin and Samir, and then adjacent newsletters or podcasts, and then I have the on the ground stuff, I think my learnings are enough that I will just go do some stuff, and I know it's more or less related to what's happening in the market.
Okay, amazing. Thanks for sharing. So, just to wrap it up, what's next for you? Brazil? You were in Brazil, spent quite some time. It seems like you've been obsessed since
Yes,
quite a few years now.
it has been. My immediate next step is not Brazil, but the broader next step is Brazil, and I hope within that step it includes you coming back to Brazil so we can share a caipirinha there.
I want to go
And
back to Brazil. I love
yeah,
Brazil.
perfect. Then you just message me, and I'll see you there. My immediate next step is I will go to Paris tomorrow for a few days, and this is a really interesting moment for me because I'm not going to oversell it, but I'm having a meeting
Yeah,
with a gallery, and this is just
nice.
just a meeting. It's just like top of funnel, but it came about through a warm intro, and so I'm very interested to follow up.
Okay.
And so I'm so interested that I would go all the way instead of just we've called already, so we've had first call number one, and then yeah, Berlin, and then back to the UK for my sister's wedding.
Amazing.
What
That's
about you?
not a bad plan. I'm just wandering around Europe right now. It's
Are you in
summer.
Barcelona?
No, I'm in Tarifa right now. But when the episode will
Tenerife.
be released, I
Oh
will be
wow.
somewhere else, yeah.
Okay, well I have to keep updated because maybe we do cross over somewhere.
Most of the summer, Lithuania, so it's my
Okay.
home country, and I'm trying to spend more time with my friends in this period
Amazing.
because Lithuanian summer is great. So if
The
you come
music
there, let
festival.
me know.
The music festival you mentioned.
It's not happening this year. We have too many
So-
weddings. It's next year.
okay. Well, have fun at the weddings. I'm sure
Th-
they're music festivals in themselves.
Oh, actually, one of them will be.
There we go.
So that's quite fun. Okay, so I like to close up the episodes with one thought to ponder for the listener. So what would be yours to share? So people after this episode can actually, I don't know, take something out of it, think through, and maybe become more creative, take some action.
Um, yeah, I think that the first question that comes into my head for a listener is, um, what do you want to contribute to the world? That's it. Like, but it's not.
Bam.
Yeah, but it's not.
What
This
a
is not
way.
easy for me because I'm trying to figure that out as well. So therefore, it's quite nice other people to think alongside, to think
Yeah.
alongside. Yeah.
Very good. Very good way to end it. And where people can follow your journey.
Yes. So I would just say artist J Song on Instagram, and everything's there, like links to further things.
Okay, so it's kind of your main go-to channel where people can find all the newsletter stuff and so
Yeah.
on.
Yeah, exactly.
Amazing.
There's a link in bio.
Very good. So I guess this is it. Thank you, James, for coming and for sharing your story and your insights and your non-conventional journey. And good luck with your art and with your meeting in Paris. And we can't wait to see more exhibitions and more thought leadership on the creators economy, I guess.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye. Ciao,
Bye.
ciao.